Maintain this for a few hours. In the alternative, why did I say it like that? That sounds way too formal. Leng Saeb is a Thai dish that has gone viral a few times on YouTube and elsewhere. It is an absolutely delicious dish that is comprised normally of pork spine, but in this recipe we're going to use both pork shoulder and beef ribs for something that is just a little bit easier to find at your local butcher shop. You can also use just pork shoulder or just pork ribs depending on your diet or any dietary restrictions. It is delicious with one or the other or both. It is pungent, it is spicy, it is citrusy, it is bright, it is sweet, it is everything that you have come to love from Thai cuisine, and it is actually well within your ability to make. Let's get started. We will be working with two types of meat today. We've got beef ribs over here, and we have pork neck bones over here that have been cut by my butcher. Traditionally, Leng Saeb is made with pork spine, which is a way for restaurateurs to repurpose a part of the pork that normally isn't really used. And what they did with it was absolutely delicious, but since it is so difficult to find pork spine at any local butcher, I've decided to go with these two things. I like using them together because I think each part adds a little something to the dish as a whole, but you could do them separately based on what you could find or what is affordable or whether or not you eat pork or not. Leng Saeb made with beef ribs on its own is absolutely delicious. Now the first thing we're gonna do with this meat is wash it. And whether you are team wash your meat or team don't wash your meat, it actually for this recipe serves a very important purpose. The way that we wash both of these things is that we're going to parboil them. Because remember, I had my butcher cut these, but they did not rinse off any of the bone meal that is stuck to these parts of the neck bone. And bone meal is gritty and full of bacteria, and you just don't want that in your food. But also what it does is that it extracts certain proteins from both the beef ribs and the pork neck bones that cook out in the form of the scum that is on top. Now that scum is not really impurities or anything, they are, as I said before, proteins, but they do have a specific gamey flavor that kind of is overpowering when making a delicate stock. So washing our meat in the form of parboiling is really important here. Now, because Leng Saeb is cooked slowly, you don't really have to worry about too much of the flavor from the meat being imparted into your initial boiling water. This is a very fast process that takes maybe between 5 to 10 minutes. You just start off with some boiling water, add in your meat. Now that I've put the meat in the pot, the water has stopped boiling. Wait till it comes back to a boil, and then at that point, set your timer for 5 minutes, and after that, it's done. Now, after your initial boil, you're gonna wanna dump this water out. Using cold water, you're gonna wanna rinse off any of the little bits that have attached themselves onto your ribs. This will help minimize any cloudiness in your broth. But at this point, this is just about clarity and not flavor, so if a clear stock is not your priority, you can just skip this part. Now, with the beef ribs done, I'm gonna do the same with the pork neck bones. You don't have to do it separately. I'm just working with a lot of meat right now, so it's just easier if I do. Now, after you're done parboiling all of your bones, it's important to wash your pot as well. There's still some of the scum and residue left over on the bottom of the pot, and starting with a fresh, clean pot is really important when dealing with a delicate stock. With your pot nice and clean, just fill it with all of your bones and cover with cold water. Now at this point the stock water is cold and I'm going to bring it up to a simmer. You don't want it to be a rolling boil because the bubbles will cloud up your broth. And over time it'll also strip all the meat off of the ribs, which you also don't want. So basically the temperature that you want to maintain is just under boiling. You should have some bubbles come up from the bottom, but not too much. Maintain this for a few hours. If you don't want to stick around and wait that long, you can slow cook it overnight. That will get you a broth that is nice and rich, and meat that will just come off the bone. One of my favorite parts about Leng Saeb is the fact that as a byproduct, you get a whole ton of beautiful meat stock that you can use for ramen or anything that you would use stock for afterwards. So what we're gonna do now is add aromatics to it. I have here some cut yellow onion, as well as 1 whole head's worth of crushed garlic. About 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, and that same amount of fish sauce. And finally, some lightly crushed white pepper. You want to cut the onions into large pieces because that makes them easier to remove. Same goes for the garlic. Crush them, but don't dice them up into small parts. If you want, you can add some extra spices in here too. I'm going with some star anise and a few bay leaves. That's it. Now, if this seems daunting to all get done in one go, Leng Saeb at this point can be made into a make-ahead dish. You can totally slow cook all of the bones beforehand and then store them in the fridge for later. Same goes with the broth that you made. What follows after is just a matter of reheating the bones and then constructing that saucy broth that you used on top of the bones after the fact, and that part is actually really quick. So if you're pressed for time or would just rather have the long waiting period of the recipe be done and over with, you can save everything that comes after this for another day. Now that the stock and bones are done, you just have to remove the onions as well as the cooked garlic and any spices you might have added as well, leaving only the bones in the broth. While the stock is finishing up cooking, I'm gonna prepare all the herbs that I need for the actual broth itself, the stuff that we're going to pour on top of all of the meat. Because I'm cooking for a lot of people, I'm just going to use 1 serrano pepper. Normally I would make it much spicier and use anywhere between 8 and 9 Thai chili peppers with the seed inside. But this time I'm not just cooking for me and Little John, we're just gonna go with 1 serrano. Another thing we'll use is a lot of cilantro. What this is pretty much the herbal and aromatic elements of your Leng Saeb broth. And now you want to create pretty much a secondary broth here using the stock that you had made before. Just 2 to 3 cups is enough. So just going by taste, we're gonna add fish sauce, lime juice, sugar, and soy sauce. For this amount, I'm gonna start with 2 tablespoons of lime juice, 2 tablespoons of fish sauce, and just giving it a mix and a taste from here. Sour, salty, and pungent, it needs just a little sugar to balance it off. 1.5 tablespoons of brown sugar. Oh yeah, that's it. Now remember, you're gonna use this almost like a sauce more than a broth, so you're gonna want this to be super strong. Just a tiny bit stronger than is enjoyable just sipping it out of a cup. That means for me, more sugar, more fish sauce, and more lime juice. I pretty much just doubled what I put in there. Now, next thing you do is bring it to a boil. And once it starts boiling, turn off the heat right away. It is at that just boiled temperature where you add in a whole bunch of your cilantro, garlic, and chilies. You don't want it to be too hot. You don't want to add these things at a rolling boil because it'll overcook all of the herbs. You want it to taste fresh and pungent still. So once it is just below boiling, no longer bubbling but still hot, is when you put all of that stuff in, and then you pour it over your tower of meat immediately, and then you serve it immediately from there. If you wait too long, the cilantro will become dull in color, and you want it to be vibrant when you serve it. Now, just as I said before, wait till it stops boiling and then add in all of your spices and herbs. Now, one of the reasons why Leng Saeb became so viral was because of how dramatic the dish is. So we're gonna do just a little manageable home version of that. Using a plate like this, where it has high walls but is still relatively flat, is ideal. It's simply a matter of just building a very high and dramatic tower out of all of the meat and bones. At this point, all of the meat from the beef ribs and the pork neck bones will fall off if you pull it too hard. So you wanna be a little bit gentle, but you can see just how much and how tender everything is. Ladle that over all of your ribs. All that goodness, all that flavor, the sweetness, the fishiness, the pungency, the saltiness, all of it. So here we have it, the completed Leng Saeb, and you saw just how much broth I have left over compared to how much I actually use for the dish. Because you can use that for ramen or noodles or dumpling. And because we seasoned it separately, it is a very versatile base stock. There's not much flavor to it, but it's still really delicious. The fish sauce that we put in there initially doesn't really taste all that fishy at all. It just gave it a little umami kick. So you can use that for almost anything that you would use a regular stock in. Oh, it's that magic combination of herbs and fish sauce and lime juice and sugar. Just, it makes you salivate as you eat it. It's just so, it hits every part of your tongue in the best possible way. And now, of course, we're gonna do the ribs. You can see, pulls right off the bone. Look at that. It is so tender and it absorbs the flavors so well. It's not overpowering, but it's just flavorful and pleasant. And I admit, it's a little bit of a messy dish to make. I can't believe I made it for a party, but they're just gonna have to deal with it. And if you can tell, it's just poached meat. So it's not all that bad for you. There was no supplemental oil in this at all. It's actually a very healthy way to consume ribs of any kind. Because of the citrus and the brightness of the flavor, totally something that you can have in the summer. Give it a try. I am sure that you would love it.